Okay. So I've loaded up this PvP template shaman with this awesome gear. And the first I'll run the Binkenstein rotation. Single target first. And we're gonna use um, Lightning Rod and Liquid Magma Totem just aren't that good for single target. Lightning Rod's actually okay, but it's probably a little too strong now. They've changed this talent 4 or 5 times in the last couple weeks, I feel like. So we're just gonna use Ascendance for now. And the Greater Fire Elemental is really strong right now, probably a little too strong. So we're just going to use that talent because it's always going to give you the best damage right now.
Okay, and I see that you've got logs selected as the output level.
Yeah, so I want a 0.25% error target, and I'm going to make a log because we might want to look at the log. All right, so we're going to run his. All right, there we go. 141,350 error. And now let's run the default, which is the one I made. All right. So it's got Binkenstein's at 141,000. Mine is at 141,952. Very similar in damage. Mine's a little bit higher. So when you get down to this level where it's higher than the margin of error, so it's a little bit better, but it's only a very little bit better. Um, you know, you're starting to split hairs a little bit. So you can see the difference. Your big ability as an elemental shaman is lava burst. His uses 82.6, mine uses 85.5. 3 extra lava burst. It's probably enough to be the entire difference in damage for between the two rotations. So somehow what I'm doing is just a little better at squeezing in lava bursts. Why? That can be hard to find out. Trying to see if there's any other big differences. Yeah, I mean, I cast a couple less lightning bolt, but I cast more lava burst. His flame shock has a 99.8 up, 0.8% uptime. Mine's 100. That's not gonna matter. Everything else looks almost exactly the same. We can look at buffs. So we'll look at Binkenstein's buffs. Ascendance would be a big one. 9.7% uptime, 2.9 uses per fight.
And now you say 2.9 uses. I've seen some questions on that. Would you like to explain the 2.9?
Sure. So look at mine. I have 3.0. All right. So that means on average I'm using it 3 times. And then his says on average he's using it 2.9 times.
Mm-hmm.
So when you do a simulation, it's going to do a bunch of iterations. This one did 1,095 iterations. And he, and the length of the fight is going to vary. It's 450 seconds plus or minus 20%. Ascendance is on a 3-minute cooldown. So you use it once when the fight starts, once at 180 seconds, once at 360 seconds. But you're probably not going to use it exactly when the fight starts, especially with Binkenstein's rotation. First you need to put up Flame Shock, and um, you want Lava Burst to already be on cooldown, and you don't want to have Stormkeeper. So you're not going to cast Ascendance immediately when it's ready. There's going to be things that delay it. And his extra logic around when you can use Ascendance is making it so that sometimes he's not casting 3 Ascendants in a fight. So we may be able to just add a condition to his uh, rotation that says if the time remaining in the fight is less than the length of the ascendance buff, use it. Maybe we
I
could
see.
try it right now and see what happens. See if that makes a difference. See, has blah 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 or and blah blah blah. So let's say regardless or 5 second remaining less than um, the buff duration of ascendance. Let's try it. See if that made a difference. Right. So it didn't increase the damage,
Okay. Well,
or and it didn't increase the ascendance usage, which means that it might be getting delayed at the start of the fight. We can look when is it using ascendance. So it's using it at 9.7 seconds. That's pretty early in the fight.
hmm,
All right, here we go. 191 seconds, 372.
I see. And since the fight is 450 seconds plus or minus 20%, that
Right,
would put it at 20% lower would be minus 90 seconds. So 360?
360 seconds.
Hmm.
Right, so
So
in
sometimes
short,
the fight's not
sometimes
long
it's not
enough.
using it.
Hmm.
Now, so that didn't make a difference. So it has something to do with when it's using it to begin. I'm using ascendance in mine. We can look at the same thing. I'm using it right at the start of the fight,
I
more or
see.
less.
So you can squeeze it in
So,
a little bit earlier.
on the shorter parses, I'm squeezing in a very tiny little bit of extra damage. This is just splitting hairs, but the point of this isn't, that that's super important. The point is figuring out why is it different. All right. Make sure I keep everything straight here. All right. So single target, the damage is really the same almost. Let's see if we can find why else would I be getting more lava bursts? It's probably not because of that ascendance thing. So let's look at his rotation. Earth shock. How many earth shocks do we each use? This is mine. I use earth shock 30.6 times. Here's his. He uses earth shock 30.9 times. It's pretty much the same. Yeah, I don't think we're gonna really be able to. I mean, the single target is so close.
Hmm.
I think the really interesting thing to take away here is this more complicated logic around when to use ascendance doesn't really help your damage. If you just,
What does your
uh,
ascendance look like? Here we go.
so I say you use ascendance if you don't have Stormkeeper. This condition right here is logic around Elemental Blast, which we weren't using for this rotation. So I'm just saying use Ascendance if you don't have Stormkeeper. And that's giving you just as much damage as making sure that Flame Shock won't go down during Ascendance and making sure that Totem Mastery won't go down during Ascendance. Those conditions are, you just don't really need them. They don't really increase your damage that much or at all. It's better to just use it. All right. So they're very close. Now, I think we're going to find more differences in the AoE because he did some things in the AoE that I just forgot to do. Or let's look at Elemental Blast first, though, because Elemental Blast is an interesting talent. gives you a buff. All right, so he's got 134, 412. I've got 136, 372. So my use of Elemental Blast is fairly significantly better than his. Uh, I'm using it 29.8 times. He's using it 27.1 times. And so our uptime on the buffs is going to be different too. And I'm still getting more lava bursts also. So if you look at my default rotation, I don't use Elemental Blast if you have Ascendance because I want to use Lava Burst during Ascendance. But I have a condition that says I say use Ascendance right after you cast Elemental Blast so that the buff you get from Elemental Blast lasts for as much of Ascendance as possible since I'm not going to refresh it during Ascendance. He doesn't have any logic around Elemental Blast in his rotation. He just uses it, um, when it's ready. He's also using a Lightning Bolt when you have these two buffs as a higher priority than some of these other as a higher priority than Elemental Blast. We could see if that makes a difference, but it probably won't. But we can always try. No, it didn't make a difference. It's within the margin of error. So there's something else going on there. This probably has to do with, see, he's letting it cast during Ascendance. No, actually he's not, because it's below Lava Burst. It'll just keep casting Lava Burst during Ascendance. Could be the timing up of Elemental Blast with Ascendance. I think I just have mine higher in the priority. I have it above Lava Burst. I think that's really the main thing. I prioritize, so it looks like prioritizing Elemental Blast above Lava Burst gives you more damage when you're using Elemental Blast. All right, let's go look at AoE. So I think his is going to do a more significant amount of damage higher than mine when we look at AoE. So I'm going to go with these talents. They're pretty good talents. Lightning Rod is really strong for AoE. Probably too strong. But we're just going to use it because there's no reason not to right now for AoE. Okay. 210,000 versus 205,500. All right, that's pretty significant. So, where's the difference? Chain Lightning. Cast it 35.4 times. Cast 35.1. Let's see. Lightning Rod damage. He got 1,080 hits. See, I got more Lightning Rod hits, which is surprising. He cast more Lava Bursts than I did. So that's going to make a difference. He casts less Lightning Bolts, more Lava Bursts. And I cast more Earthquakes. So it looks like he had better Earthquake usage. I used it too much. I used too much Earthquake. And I lost Lava Bursts. So we're going to see how to fix that. Now, one thing I noticed in his is his multi-target rotation. He says go into the multi-target rotation, which is just these couple of actions whenever there's multiple targets. He's not using any of his cooldowns during AoE, like Elemental Mastery. He's not using it during AoE. I am. So let's see if that makes a difference. So I kind of prepared this ahead of time so you don't have to watch me type. So I'm going to disable him in my cooldown rotation. I'm going to enable him right here. Whenever there's multi-target, it'll short circuit it and it won't use Elemental Mastery or Ascendance during AoE. We're not taking the Ascendance talent, so that's fine. All right, so we'll save that, see if it makes a difference. All right, that made no difference in how much damage I did. Okay, so let's try something else. So the other thing, I think the main thing is that lightning rod. We're going to add a rule. I'm going to say if you have lightning rod, all right. So I'm going to say if you have lightning rod, look for a target that doesn't have lightning rod. Let's try that. That's got to make a difference. There we go. 207,663. That's good. We're getting closer. So we identified one of the things that matters, and that was a good thing to add. This is why comparing rotations between two people, you can see things that you might have missed. So the other thing that's different that I noticed is he's only going into AoE if you have more than 3 targets. I was doing mine if you have more than 2 targets. I think this is probably where the earthquake totem thing comes in. As the targets start dying off, probably throwing down an extra earthquake totem when it's not really worth spending all that maelstrom on it. So let's increase the threshold and we'll run it again. See if we can get even higher. And then while that does its thing, we can prepare our next test, which is once you're down, this is Iskar, so you're going to kill off all those little outcasts, and then there's going to be a Talon Priest left. It's probably worth using Chain Lightning when there's just 2 or 3 targets left.
And now you didn't do both of those changes at once so that you can
No.
isolate, right?
Right.
Isolate what the changes are.
Well, that didn't help. My damage went down when I made it more than 3.
Hmm.
Interesting. Let's change it back. And let's test it with this change. The chain lightning in the less than when there's only 2 targets left, it'll use chain lightning. There we go. That's the condition that makes the most difference. Using chain lightning when you have 2 targets. So in the Iskar script, it would be when it's just uh, the talent. There's a point where Iskar comes back, but the talent priest is not quite dead. So there's Iskar and the talent priests and the Raven or whatever. I can't remember exactly. There's usually a big ad that might still be around once you kill off the outcasts, or in the later waves, there's more than one big ad. All right. Now, it's still a little bit less, but it's so close you can call them almost the same. Just like the single target rotation, mine is a little bit better, but they're really the same. And this one, his is a little bit better, but they're really the same. Now, I did notice one thing that neither of us had when I first started looking at this, but then I tried it. So I'm just using Stormkeeper pretty much whenever, but Stormkeeper only buffs Lightning Bolt, not Chain Lightning. So you don't want to use Stormkeeper while you're AoEing. So I made this. I said only use it if you can only hit one target with Chain Lightning. There we go. We got more damage. And now they're the same. I bet if we added that condition to Pinkenstein's, that it would help his too. Let's try it. Stormkeeper. And then I'm gonna I'm gonna revert the change that didn't help us, where I took the cooldowns where I won't use them during AoE. Let's see if that really even matters. There we go. 2011 457. So that's definitely worth putting in. Makes his better too. Right. So now his is better than mine again. I think I'm still using more Earthquake Totem. The only way to use less Earthquake Totem is to change this to needing 4 targets. Okay, so I put it back to where I allow cooldown usage during AoE, and that actually increased the damage on mine. So now they're getting pretty close again.
Hmm.
Now I'm gonna test it again with the greater than 3 target. Yeah. Yeah, I used less Earthquake, but it didn't actually increase my damage. It really is exactly the same. So, and this script might not, yeah, it makes a little use of it, but it looks like using Earthquake on 3 targets or 4 targets is about a wash. So you could really put it either way. They're so close. On an AoE fight, yeah, these are for all intents and purposes the same. They're almost within the margin of error of
Yeah,
each
it's like
other.
what, 800
With a
difference? 700
500
difference?
margin of error, with a 500 error, and they're within 700 or 650 of each other, they're essentially the same.
Yeah.
So there, we found one thing that we could do for both rotations, which is don't cast Stormkeeper if there's more than one target. And we found in his rotation that casting Chain Lightning when there's more than one target and cycling targets when you have Lightning Rod are important. And then we found from my rotation that um, you don't really need this extra logic around Ascendance. It doesn't increase your damage on average. You can really just use Ascendance whenever you don't have any Stormkeeper charges to get rid of. You don't need to time up Ascendance. You don't need to worry about casting Flame Shock at a suboptimal time to make sure it doesn't fall off during Ascendance. And you don't need to worry about casting Totem Mastery at a suboptimal time so it doesn't fall off during Ascendance. It's not a big deal. We also found that Elemental Blast is worth using as a higher priority than lava burst. So that's another difference. And elemental blast was better in my rotation. I think those are the big takeaways.